Well, aloha and good morning to everybody watching on the Honolulu Star Advertiser Facebook page. My name is Ryan Kalei Suji, and welcome to the COVID Care Conversation. We want to thank all of you for tuning in. We want to make sure that all of you continue to let us know where you're watching from today. We are going to be joined by Governor David Ige in just a few moments. We are having a little bit of technical issues. Usually I have Yunji Denise here with me, but we are waiting for her to come back online, and we'll be taking your questions about for the governor. Again, concerning COVID here in Hawaii, we have been with this broadcast for the past 4 weeks and are so thankful to our partners at the Hawaii Executive Collaborative for helping to promote this conversation. And we know that we have a lot of questions for the governor, so we're going to try to bring him in the stream right now so we can hopefully hear from him and get a little update about what's happening. Good morning, Governor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Terrific.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time. We know that you're a very busy man, and we want to just thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation. First question, there's a lot going on here, and we just sort of want to get an update as to what's happening. Hang on, we have Yunji that's going to be joining us here in just a moment. But if you can sort of update us on what's happening, what's happened over the weekend, maybe some of the latest highlights here with COVID-19 in Hawaii.
Certainly. Thanks, Ryan. And hi, Yunji. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I have been trying to get out so I can keep the community updated about what's happening. I did want to start with a couple of the statistical updates, but really wanted to let the people know that, we are doing very well here in the state of Hawaii. I know that there's been lots of discussion and lots of stories about testing, and I wanted the people to know that we are really amongst the leaders in the country on testing. Our state lab was one of the very first state labs to get certified to be able to test for the COVID-19 virus, and we became certified in February 28th. As I said, one of the very first state labs to be able to do that. And we have been very aggressive in testing. We've completed more than 18,600 tests of individuals all across the state. Most of them, the overwhelming majority of them are negative. Our current count of positive COVID-19 residents is at 499, and that does include two of those aboard the cruise ship that was did a quarantine on the mainland, and then I think they're back in the islands now. But so, we're testing. Everybody likes to talk about South Korea and their testing program. We are testing more aggressively than even South Korea is in terms of per capita testing. And, we stood up more than 40 testing centers all around the state very early on. At this point in time, anybody who should be tested is being tested. Even in spite of the challenges for personal protective equipment that all states are having. So I just really wanted to reaffirm that. I really wanted to thank the residents for doing their part and honoring the stay-at-home orders and work-from-home orders because it truly is making a difference. When you look at our outcomes, and you see what's happening in New York, for example, where 40% of those tested are positive for COVID-19, we are running, 499 of 18,000 tests. So obviously, it's a very, very small percentage of our community that has COVID-19. And I think most importantly, the rate of hospitalization here in the state of Hawaii is very low. It's less than 10%. As you see some of the statistics in New York or New Jersey, where a high percentage of those who are tested positive end up in the hospital. Our rate of hospitalization is very, very low. And then for those who do go to the hospital, only less than 3% actually end up in intensive care. So our healthcare system is handling this pandemic very well. As you know, every death is sad, but the number of deaths that have occurred in the state of Hawaii because of this pandemic is relatively small. Um, and, clearly every death is unwanted, but overall, the state is performing very well.
Can I ask you, a lot of these questions that are coming in today are about unemployment. Before, obviously, we can address or the economic issue, we have to be able to reopen the state. Do you anticipate April 30th being the day that the stay-at-home order is lifted, or do you think it will go beyond that?
I do think, we've started the conversation amongst the mayors to really determine what would be the conditions that we would reopen the state. We are looking at it collectively. It probably will be a phased in kind of activity. We do want to see what kinds of activity would not risk infecting people. So, I would definitely encourage your viewers to think about, especially if they're small businesses, what kinds of ways can they change how they do business to really be able to be successful in the post-COVID era. COVID-19 has changed the planet, and it definitely will change life in Hawaii going forward. And so businesses, for example, you see a lot of retail merchants are changing their business practices to be, order online and pick up and those kinds of things that allows us to really implement social distancing in how they do business. So, our conversation will be in a couple of different ways. We'll be talking about how can we relax some of the restrictive orders that we've put in place. I think that they will still be general restrictive orders on the general population, but we will begin to think about which businesses we can allow to reopen because their activity does not promote social gathering and the possibility of infecting others.
When do you expect to make those announcements?
We talk about it every day, Yanji. I mean, we're looking at the data. The number of cases have been slowly trending downwards. We want to be able to continue to see that. We do have a very active testing regimen, as we've said. We are looking at how we can do a better job of enforcing some of the stay-at-home orders, work-at-home orders. We are looking at how do we reinvent the hospitality industry in the post-COVID environment. We know that that includes keeping track of visitors who come to the islands, being able to monitor their health, being aware of whether they're ill or not. We will be engaging the hotels and other hosts to help them help us talk about what a good visitor would be, how we can monitor the health of the visitors and make sure that if they become ill, that they can be taken care of, and most importantly, can be isolated so that they don't infect others. I mean, so all of those things kind of go into the conversation about how we consider re-engaging the community and restarting business activity.
One question that's come in from Sheila specifically for the hospitality industry, and she's saying that at the press conference you made on March 17th, you sort of asked for that 30-day for visitors not to come to Hawaii. So that 30 days is coming up. Can we expect to see maybe that being extended where we continue to keep Hawaii sort of closed off, being that the 30 days is sort of almost up already?
Yeah, certainly it will extend beyond at least through April 30th at the earliest. And Ryan, the whole world has really shut down travel. Travel is restricted to Japan and Korea and a lot of other countries. So, I think that this pandemic is a global phenomenon, and travel, because that is one way to introduce the infection, will be restricted at least for a period of time longer.
I think Noelani Kaufusi has a question, and it's sort of going the other way. I know a lot of people are asking to lift the lockdown. Noelani is asking, why don't you just have everyone go on a full lockdown for 14 days, only first responders getting out, so that, you know, this is really nipped in the bud? What's your response to that? Someone actually calling for more stringent restrictions.
You know, I do appreciate that, but I would say that, you know, the overwhelming majority of our community is really abiding by the restrictions. I do think that the curfew idea that Kauai and Mayor Kawakami had instituted in Kauai, I think effective in reminding people that they should be at home overnight and when they're not at work. So I do appreciate the willingness to lock down more, but you know, this virus is very infectious, and the most difficult part, Ryan and Yunji, is that it's hard to identify in our community who has the virus. You know, we hear more and more about asymptomatic transmission, and asymptomatic people being able to infect others. And so I think that that's the challenge. You know, it's finding the balance of how we live in a social distancing kind of way, especially as you know, I mean, so much of what we did before COVID-19 was so about being with people and about sharing experiences. It's, you know, a new experience for many of us to have to be apart and use technology just like this to have, you know, if we did this 2 months ago, we'd be in the same room talking together, and now we're having to do it via a teleconference. I do think that for this period of time, it is about maintaining distance.
You know, David, excuse me, Governor.
Yeah, sorry.
The questions that are coming in are a lot about unemployment. And we know we saw the numbers come in. We talked to Scott Murakami last weekend, who talked about the challenges that he's having. What sort of efforts are making on that end to sort of clear up sort of the backlog that's happening, especially with the unemployment office?
You know, certainly we're doing a number of things that were very unusual and first time happening. You know, we did reach out with the employers, and rather, you know, usually unemployment is something that the employee, once you're laid off, you go through the process of filing the application and filling out the forms. We because we anticipated that our system is antiquated, and remember, we went from dealing with 100 applicants per day to now we're dealing with 10,000 or more. I know that it got up to almost 20,000 in a day. So certainly our system has been overwhelmed. But we've been working with employers, giving them the forms, asking them to help employees fill out the forms. You know, the system is very specific. So if something is missing, it delays the processing of the request for unemployment. I do know that we were able to catch up on most of the backlog, but there still is a number of people that we're working through. You know, we are reassigning state employees to help support the unemployment office in completing the system and getting it updated. And working to get those unemployment checks out as quickly as we can.
One of the things so many people in Hawaii face even before this crisis, of course, is the high cost of housing. Hawaii residents spend a disproportionate amount of their income on housing. What mechanisms are in place can the state do, first of all, for tenants who might be, you know, for renters, in terms of helping with evictions? But then also, you know, you have to balance that with people who are landlords and rely on that income for their own needs or for property taxes or condo fees if it happens to be in a condominium. So how do you balance that? What can be done? And then also for those mortgage holders, what can be done for them?
You know, certainly we are looking at that issue with evictions and considering issuing a supplemental emergency proclamation or an executive order to stop the evictions. I know that that is something that I've heard as I've talked with people all around the state. I've talked with many landlords, and both on the commercial side as well as residential, and at least the large landowners and landlords definitely have put programs in place to allow, recognizing that this situation is really unprecedented, and has been willing to offer both commercial as well as residential accommodations in different ways. We've talked with all the lenders, and they all are making accommodations for mortgage payments as well. So, I definitely would encourage those who are struggling with rent payments or mortgage payments to really contact their landlord and their owner. They can also call 211. There's been several efforts of providing philanthropy and private sector offering support for rent payments to stop people from being evicted. And that's definitely one area that we know that once we receive the federal funds, we'll be looking at what additional assistance can be provided to people who are having trouble with both rent as well as mortgage payments.
One of the questions that I know that continue to come in, and you've already addressed this, I know, in your press conference, but again, we're seeing questions about it here, so I just wanted to bring it up, was the airport, and being able, you in your capacity to be able to shut down the airport. But
Sure.
I know you mentioned that it is not under your jurisdiction, but if you can explain maybe why a
Sure.
decision like that is not something that maybe you can handle or you can make because it's of a federal level, but the airport shutdown in general.
Yeah, certainly. I've had lots of conversations with the FAA, who really govern the airports. And, airports and highways are governed and regulated by the federal government to a large extent. Once they make the investment, it really is intended to facilitate travel. So I did have extensive conversations with the FAA, and they made it pretty clear that to shut down travel to Hawaii to a federal airport is virtually impossible. I can make the request, but it would not get approved. And they were pretty clear. They pointed me in the right direction, and it actually initiated the whole 14-day mandatory quarantine. They basically said that the airports were designed to facilitate travel. To shut it down, they could not consider any time that they shut down travel to an airport unless it was a hurricane or a natural disaster and the airport was inoperable. They suggested that once the traveler is on the island, then it's in my jurisdiction. So I have control over quarantine. I can do a lot of things once they land, as long as the activity doesn't slow down the movement of people so much that it impacts aircraft coming into the airport. So that's where we focus our efforts, Ryan. They essentially told me, no sense you ask, because they won't approve it. And by the way, quarantine is your best opportunity to manage the flow of people coming into the state of Hawaii.
Do you anticipate getting any stricter on the tourists that are coming here, on the visitors? We've seen arrests on Kauai, but to my knowledge, we have not seen any on any of the other islands. And I could be wrong about that, but that's my understanding. Do you think that there should be, is there a way to do more enforcement so that the word kind of gets out that Hawaii really is not open for business right now when it comes to visitors?
We are working with the counties to really implement that. And I think more importantly, Ryan and Yunji, we're really rethinking the hospitality industry in the post-COVID era. We do know that we want to reopen travel at some point in time. It won't be, it'll be after April 30th for sure, and we'll be looking at that. But we also know that we need to be able to enforce a quarantine in a meaningful way. Last week we did put on a website online so that we can begin to automate the completion of the forms. We are constantly thinking about how we can close the gaps in our current process. So one of the ideas we're looking at right now is, well, maybe we should have certified places for quarantine. So work with the hotel industry to identify and get them to register. So when someone travels here, they have to have a confirmation at a location. I keep hearing that one of the big loopholes is Airbnbs, and that people are making reservations to quarantine at Airbnbs and then not showing up. That might be a way that we require them to quarantine in a certified location, and we can make sure, all the hotels have been very supportive in trying to implement our quarantine orders. So maybe that's the next step of doing a better job of closing gaps so that everyone who comes into the state, resident or visitor, complies with the mandatory quarantine order.
Okay, well, we know that you actually have another appointment, so we want to respect your time. But we want to thank you for the opportunity to just have this conversation. Is there anything that you want to sort of update people on, or any last words that you want to say to those who are tuned in right now?
I just want to really thank them, Ryan and Yunji, for really being able to support and live with the mandatory stay-at-home orders. It's clear. I know that I've gone out and looked at people, for the most part, are obeying the stay-at-home orders. I mean, there are a few people that continue to violate them, but overwhelmingly the majority has. I just want people to know that their actions has really allowed us to be one of the best performing states in dealing with this pandemic. Our rates of infection are really low, lowest amongst the country. Our rate of hospitalization, the mortality rate is really lower than virtually every other state across the country. And it's really all because of the collective action of all of us in the community. So again, just thank you for what you do to keep our people informed. But most importantly, thanking all the people of the islands for doing their part. We can only be successful together. So just really want to ask them to take care of themselves, take care of their neighbors like they are doing, and most importantly, help to take care of our community.
Thank you so much for coming on today. You have an open invitation. You are welcome back here anytime. There's so many questions that we weren't able to get to, so please do come back. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yes. Thank you for asking.
Wow. Well, you heard it there. And what was interesting, I thought, about what he said is that he really did not commit to ending that on April 30th. So, I mean, the mayor sort of indicated that as well. You have the Department of Education saying 4 weeks of 4 weeks of no new cases before school can begin. So we are getting the signs here, as if they were not here already, that this is going beyond April 30th.
Yeah, and I think that they are trying to take in all those things into considerations. I'm not sure that the state government is ready to make that determination yet. And then I also think that we have to kind of see what happens this week as well. The numbers, as we know, continue to go down. And just speaking of the numbers, kind of giving all of you an update, if you missed at the top of the broadcast when the governor was talking about that, there were 13 new cases as of Sunday, for a total of 499 cases. Hawaii still with 9 deaths. The good news is that 310 patients have recovered since the start of the outbreak, which is more than 60% of the people who have been infected here in Hawaii are now classified as recovered. So those are good news.
Yeah, I loved seeing that statistic. That was great to see, because you see those numbers and they get bigger and bigger each time, but then we don't always get the information about who's gotten better.
Right, definitely. And I know that one of the other questions that, as we continue to see more coming in, had to deal with unemployment, and that he's reiterating that the state is reallocating some of the other workers into the Department of Labor to help with the onslaught that they are seeing and the number of claims that are coming on. We also got word this weekend that the federal government has begun sending out those checks for those people who have qualified for that stimulus, additional funding for the stimulus packages that actually happened over the weekend. So more and more, we're going to, I think, start seeing the trickle down of the loans that were also provided for the small businesses. Those relief efforts from a federal government should be coming in sometime this week. We're actually going to be speaking to Senator Mazie Hirono tomorrow to find out a little bit more about the federal update, to see what she might be able to provide information on that as well.
Yeah, that'll be great to hear because they're already talking about, the CARE 2.0, as they're calling it, the next federal relief package that they're hoping to push through. Some other headlines that we wanted to tell you about, and again, keep putting in those comments. We read all of them, and they help us to inform, booking the next guest. So we've got some great people coming on this week, and we read all of those questions. So please keep them coming. Share this video and also like it so that we know that you're here. Some other headlines, and this was actually really interesting, much more localized. Pets can get COVID-19. They cannot pass it to people, but they can get it from people. The paper has a really thorough write-up of this. So if you're going out to walk your dog, it's actually important to do social distancing with your pet from other people. Don't let strangers interact with your pets. There's a lot more about this. Layla Fujimori has an article about that. So make sure you read about that. That's very interesting. And Ryan, some big lines this weekend, and we want to highlight the Salvation Army and Hawaii Food Service Alliance as our Hawaii hero.
That's right. Over the weekend, the Hawaii Salvation Army, in partnership with the Hawaii Food Service Alliance, passed out more than 600, well, they service 600 vehicles that pass through the food distribution center at Ala Moana Center. So thousands of people showed up for this sort of drive-through that happened on Saturday, with 90 volunteers getting involved. So we want to definitely highlight them and their donations that were made, again, by the Hawaii Food Service Alliance, where over 4,000 eggs and thousands of loaves of bread and food were actually handed out to people who showed up. I think it's a telling illustration of the times we're in, when you see lines that long of people like just lining up for food, showing that a lot of people are struggling right now, and we recognize that this is not just a disease, a virus that is impacting people's own physical health, but the economy and their ability to put food on the table. So thank you to Salvation Army for doing that.
Yeah, wonderful to see that help being given out there. And I was reading about some of the folks who were in line there saying that they never anticipated that they would be in a line like that, because they've been gainfully employed for years, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in this circumstance. So good to see that that aloha being shared there. The other way that you can help, if you are looking for a way to help, and if you're in a position to help, is Honolulu EMS needs your help right now. They need fabric masks for first responders between calls. So they don't want to be using PPE while they're, just driving around, but they need to put it on every time. So between those calls, they need to wear a fabric mask, and not all of those first responders have enough fabric masks. So we put the public information officer, Shane Enright. She was here recently talking about all the folks that, all the things that EMS is doing. That's her email. If you have one mask, if you have 100 masks, whatever you have, email her, let her know. Her email is also in the show description. They would really appreciate any fabric mask that you can donate to them.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of people who are actually taking that up now. I think the new hobby will be sort of making masks. We want to also provide you an update. I know a lot of people are asking, why are we having the Lieutenant Governor on? Why aren't we having certain people on? This is sort of our lineup happening this week. We have, again, Senator Mazie Hirono, who will be on tomorrow. We have Superintendent Kishimoto, who will be here. One of the questions that we want to find out more about is when schools will start, and that, those 4 weeks of no cases before school can open. I want to get more information about that. We will be talking to Lieutenant Governor Josh Green. I know that some comments that came in from Jano, I think, was asking, why aren't we talking to Senator Green? Well, Lieutenant Governor Green. Well, we're going to be talking to him on Thursday. And then we have Britt Young, a marriage and family counselor, to talk a little bit about the impact that this is having on many families who are finding themselves maybe around each other 24/7 and finding ways.
Yeah, it is a stressful time, and we can definitely use the help of a marriage and family therapist to tell us how we can interact with our loved ones in the most productive and positive way possible. We look forward to her on Friday. We also want to tell you about alohatrace.org. The paper has a write-up about this today, or you can just head over to that website. It's a short online survey. It literally takes less than 2 minutes. It's focusing on your symptoms. It's contact tracing in a nutshell, and it's something that they're trying to get folks to fill out every single day. They're going to transfer all that data to UH, the National Disaster Preparedness Center, and the Pacific Urban Resilience Lab for analysis and research. The more we fill out surveys like this and do our own contact tracing, the faster they know where this disease is spreading in our community. So please check out alohatrace.org. And we also have resources. The governor did mention you contacting Aloha United Way. That's that 211 hotline. We've got a list of resources up in the show description, or I guess it's down below in the show description. I keep pointing up, but down below. So we put those numbers in every time so that you know who to call, but the easiest one is just 211. That is Aloha United Way.
Yeah, so again, looking forward to seeing all of you back here tomorrow. We thank you all for tuning in and for your questions for the governor. We want to encourage you to help promote this and pass on this video and share it and like it. We also, again, want to thank our friends over at the Hawaii Executive Collaborative who have helped to make this conversation possible by sponsoring this COVID care conversation and helping us to connect with all of you. Again, tomorrow we will be featuring Senator Mazie Hirono, and we'll talk a little bit more about the efforts that are being made on a federal level. But until then, we want to wish you all a happy Monday and continue to stay home and stay safe. Aloha.
Aloha.